We are live. We're the Tendys on Pattison. I am Jack. I'm joined by, as always, by Paul and Chris, who's Fuzzy. That's what I know you as. That's what your name is on the screen right now.
Yes.
We made it, guys.
We're on time.
And the season is over. We made it.
Post-mortem, baby.
So it's never a fun season. It's never a good sign.
Can we talk about the big news about the Chick-fil-A running out of sauce?
What sauce did they run out of?
Well, you're only limited. You can only get a certain amount of Chick-fil-A sauce. And then after this, I got to go fill my tote up with gasoline so that I'm good to go.
If you take your Tupperware, don't forget your lid and make sure you wear gloves.
So, Chris, since you brought that up, and we'll get to hockey in a second, but I mean, how bad is your gas mileage that you might be worried about it?
Nah, I'm fine. I'm not worried about it.
I got a car that gets 9 miles to the gallon.
Well, you better buy a horse. Like I posted last night, you better buy a goddamn horse. I'm not paying $6. It's $7 a gallon in Virginia. So
yeah, but we're on a different.
Yeah,
we're on a different. We're not on that pipeline. We actually have refineries here, and the concern though is about people, gouging, price gouging because they know everybody's panicked, and then people filling up their Acme bag, or to be very Philadelphia about it, their Acme bag with gasoline.
After they cleaned it out with water. We have refineries. They just catch on fire every 3 years.
As they sit there,
John Noble.
As they're sitting there filling up their tote full of gasoline, telling me that Carter Hart sucks.
Yeah. God damn it, Jesse.
And then you just roll your cigarette.
You can never go wrong with a Breaking Bad reference.
So, now that we've gotten current events and pop culture covered, we can talk Flyers. Is just what we do here every Thursday at 5:30. It has not been a fun season to do that. The unfortunate part is once March got rolling and then closed, you pretty much knew the season was over. Right? You had a month and a half of hockey that you knew meant nothing. That's never a fun season.
Yeah, and we had talked about the Lake Tahoe game as the game where really started to fall apart. But going into that game, there was a lot of optimism because they just beat the Caps. They didn't just beat the Caps; they kicked the shit out of the Caps in Washington. Then they all got COVID, and then with 2/3 of a team and then the equivalent of the three of us playing, they lost to the Rangers in a shootout. Then they go to Lake Tahoe and they actually have a pretty good first period, and it all just falls apart in the second period. And if you're just thinking about it, you're like, well, that's where it all fell apart. But then they won 3 games in a row after that. They beat the Rangers again. They shut out the Sabres 2 times in a row, which is basically shutting out a 14 and under youth hockey team. And then it just all falls apart in March.
And so, Paul, because I'm pulling up the sheet because we wanted to break down kind of what it looked like. The reality is obviously March is bad, but it's not like they went through and lost every game. It's you got a loss, a win, 2 losses, a win, 2 losses, a win. Obviously, you're not getting enough wins to make up for the losses, but it wasn't just a straight up. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was a straight up slop fest. But if you're looking at it, it doesn't look like it was not rescuable. It's just that April wasn't good enough either.
No, I mean, when you put the list together with the records, and to think that they were just 6-8-3 during March is actually a lot better than what you would think, because the way they did it, because they gave up.
Well, those losses were particularly bad.
when your goal differential is minus 32 in 15 games, that's just absurd. That is insane. You're losing you're losing by an average of 2 goals in every game, but you're winning 45% of them.
It's what was surprising to me when Bill asked if we were doing the eulogy. That's the baby's buried. The eulogy's over. Now we can actually talk about, are we going to sue the doctors or not?
Yeah, when training camp starts, we'll come out to the Undertaker music. Yeah, they were really bad in March. Like 2 of their wins were against Buffalo, so it's
here's part of like when I looked at it. The magic number, it seems like this year, was to get to 3 goals. On the average, if you got to 3 goals, you would win.
Or 9.
Well, you can't win if you score 9. Obviously, you're unlikely to score 10, but they scored 9. And that's like one of those games where when it gets out of hand, the compete gets taken out of you. But there's too many games where they have 1 goal or 2 goals. You're not really going to win many games 1-0 or 2-1 or 2-0.
Yeah, and the first 2 months of the season, their offense was clicking. They were also converting on an unsustainable percentage of shots, because if you remember the talk when they were through the first 2 months through February, the talk, especially from AV, was saying like, we're winning, but the process sucks. And when the process actually started to get better, and actually if you go back to February, they have the overtime loss to Boston when they blew the 3-0 lead, and then they lose 2-1 to Boston. The process was actually looking better, and then then Lake Tahoe and all that happens, but then they had the 2 games in Buffalo where again the process looked better. They were playing more like they were in 1920 before COVID. But it all just fell apart. They'll fall apart for 5 minutes and then the entire game would implode.
What do you got, Chris?
No. I think he meant 2020, not 1920.
No, they're the Flyers.
They made
the stock market crashed, and
I get it.
But what I need to look at, and we'll maybe do that next week, is so in the first season, like, yes, they were converting on low amounts of shots. It's like they weren't getting a lot of shots, but every shot they got was like a high danger chance. And I feel like what ended up happening was when that came back down to earth was when their high danger chances came down to earth and they were getting like average looks, they started giving up more high danger chances, and when you look at it through the year, the reality is, and we have discussed it, and I know we've gotten some pushback, but the reality is against medium and high danger chances, the goaltending wasn't good enough either, right? So the goaltending was only, as far as how poor they could be, the goaltending was only outdone by the defense, but they both were not good enough. And then the team didn't score enough goals. And what's that a recipe for?
Right. They were 31st in goals allowed.
So I think part of it, what went into it, and the reason why the offense dried up, is because that they were starting to focus more on suppressing shots and just getting more quantity of shots. They wanted to have a better shot differential, and they started focusing more on that, and it would happen. But the problem is you wouldn't get. It would be a handful of shifts. It would be a period, be half a game, but then it would all fall apart. And one guy would make a mistake, and it would all snowball. And I think that's the theme of this entire year, this shortened, compacted, shitty season, is that whenever anything bad happened, it just all snowballed. It was quicksand. They weren't able to get out of it. They just kept sinking.
So T-Can rises. It looks like they couldn't set anything up just due to speed. There was a bit of an issue with. I don't think that the Flyers are a slow team like they used to be, but I think that there was an issue with like compete in the hard spots. Two guys go into the corner. The Flyers almost never came out with it.
And I feel like they were always caught flat-footed. Like, yeah, I know that's a phrase that's always used and overused, but you can just see by the stats that they had. I mean, think about how good they were on faceoffs. Like, they were second in the league in faceoffs, but their penalty kill was 30th, and then like you say, they would lose in the corner, and then I just feel like I just said, always caught flat-footed, and then you would leave your goalie out to dry. It's just like they have enough time to like reset, dive in front of that puck, that like Niskin or anybody else used to do. They just weren't good.
So to take Paul's theme and to take what you're saying, there's like a thing that you talk about like when it comes to combat sports. You talk about quicksand, and it's like you make one mistake and then you try to make a mistake that, or then you try to make a move that's overcompensating for that mistake, and that makes you make another mistake. And then you try to make a move that makes you, and you overcompensate for the second mistake. And now you're in quicksand, then you're flailing. And I feel like it's like it would avalanche for this team. Somebody would make a mistake, somebody would overcompensate, and then it would just snowball. Then it ends up in the net, and then they're playing too tight, and then the goaltender's cheating because the defense isn't playing in the right spot, and boom, now it's 2 goals. Now it's 3 goals. And that's it. The game's over. And sure, they'd go back to under the Hackstall, the almost comeback kids in a lot of games, not 9-0 games, but in a lot of games where they were chasing the game. And I feel like just not trying, like not learning from the mistake and trying to dig yourself out of the hole while it's going on can almost be more damaging than regrouping. And I feel like that was a lot of games.
And they almost there's things in hockey that, and there's things in every sport, but in hockey there's things that you just want to avoid happening. And the Flyers let almost all of them happen, giving up goals in the first 2 minutes or last 2 minutes of a period happen all the time.
Killers.
Giving up a goal right after you score. That happened so frequently, it wasn't even funny. Giving up a goal right after you gave up a goal, which happened all the time. And that's what leads to the snowballs. And you hear the stupid cliches like, all right, this next shift is important. Like every shift is important. But those important shifts of starting a period, ending a period, after right after a goal, whether it's for or against, after a power play, after a kill, like those shifts are more important than the general 5-on-5 shifts. And that's where they gave up all, like it seemed like it felt like 75% of their goals were all within those situations, and that's why it just caused everything to snowball. So everyone wishes they could play the Sabres all year long.
Well, you know what though? The record against the Penguins was the same. They weren't good enough against the bad teams.
No, I mean
5-3 versus the Sabres, 5-3 versus the Penguins.
They weren't even good against themselves.
No, right? The reality is in a season like this where you're playing everybody 8 times, those bottom feeder teams, you really need to. You're not going to win all the games against the better teams. Like if you're better than than them, hopefully you win a series 5-3, right? Like you're not really going to take Boston 6-2. They were definitely not undefeated against the Rangers. But you're hoping to be, like in the better teams, you want like they had were against the Penguins 5-3. There goes Fuzz.
Thanks for verbally saying something.
Yeah. Thanks for the heads up, Chris. You know what they say about Chris?
I texted you.
He's built a little bit the same.
Get out of here. Goodbye, people.
Yep. So, But those bad teams, you really want to be like 6-2 and 7-1 against. And the fact is, even those bad teams, they weren't good enough against them.
I mean, and the problem is the bad teams aren't even like outside of the Sabres. They're not that bad. Like the Rangers have a lot of talent on their team. The Devils, even though they're not as good, they have talent in that team.
And they're fast. They're really fast.
And they're, they could be a scary team in the future.
I think they're about 2 years away.
They have to make the right moves. They still don't have anywhere near good enough defense. And that's coming from a Flyers fan.
I don't know if you know, but I mean, they're paying $10 million to Subban. They're not really going to, that's going to be a little bit of a hamstring on improving their defense.
I mean, he was better this year than he was his first year in New Jersey, and I think he's got one more year left.
That's not bad, because that for them, and we'll get back to the Flyers, but for them, and not that I want to root for the New Jersey Devils, they're right behind the Penguins and teams I want to root for, but for them, that's like perfect timing. That comes off right when your young players are probably hitting. Your window is opening.
But again, the problem is defensemen. They have so this was their D to end the season. PK, Ryan Murray, Damon Severson, Will Butcher, Connor Carrick, which is just an AHL guy, Ty Smith, who's a promising young offensive defenseman, Siegenthaler, who was in Washington, and Matt Tennyson. That was their
yeah. No one's striking fear in your heart. Butcher's pretty fast, though. I remember
Butcher's he's a power
specialist.
Play
he's a specialist. He's like their a little bit.
PK is worth probably half of what. So he's got one more year left at 9. Ryan Murray's a UFA. Severson still has 2 more years left. Severson's a solid 4. Butcher is like Ghost, like we just talked about. He's a 5 that should get power play minutes. But Ty Smith he's another guy that's probably going to get those power play minutes because he got power play minutes this year. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But they just don't. They have the potential to be loaded up front, but their back end, man, is real bad.
That's a little bit of the problem that Edmonton has had, in their pursuit of a cup. Spending all those first round picks on offensemen sometimes can leave desiring players on the back end. It's just, when your offense, when your player scores 102 points in 56 games, your defense doesn't even have to be that great. But
I mean, so I just brought them up. So Darnell Nurse has really turned out to be.
He's come along.
He's come a long way. He was getting Norris talk a little while ago. Adam Larson, who they got in the Taylor Hall trade from New Jersey, he's okay. He's a solid, 4. Chris Russell was a 4-5. Tyson Barrie was a very good addition to them, and he's a UFA, so they're going to have to pay him because he's
a very good veteran. Very good veteran player.
Yeah, he's had an awesome year for them. He just fits their system perfectly, which is basically leave the puck for McDavid. That's their offensive system. Ethan Bear's a good young defenseman. Kulikov's just a pickup. Caleb Jones is a promising young defenseman. So their defense looks, and to be honest, when you have McDavid and Draisaitl, like you just need your D to just be solid, not.
They don't have to ask that much from them.
Yeah.
So T-Can rises, just so you're aware, they were 4-4 against the Rangers. The Rangers won that 9-0 win against them.
It was 7-3 in those 2 games.
Yeah, and then they also scored after the 9-0 win. They had an 8-goal game, right?
Yeah, they were up 6-0, so they outscored the Flyers 15 straight goals, and then so it was 17-3 in those 2 games.
Yeah. So. No, it was actually the Rangers are actually the Flyers. I feel like because we gear so much up for the Penguins, so that's why we have such a good record. They're built to play against a team like that. In last year, they were built very well to play against Washington. They were not clearly this year. The heavier teams they've really, really struggled with. But that's where we are. They weren't good enough against any of these teams.
No, they just weren't. They just weren't good enough. Period.
Yeah.
And I get people are going to be pissed off at the exit interviews because Chuck and AV didn't call someone out. And
what the fuck are they supposed to do? How's that going to help anybody?
It's not going to help. Like if Chuck comes out and says, Provorov has to be way better, and so now he's going to piss off Provorov. Like there's you gain nothing from it. The one disturbing thing that I heard was Provorov saying he thought he had a pretty good year. And he was not god awful because people expected him to just dominate, and he's just not that guy. And he wasn't that bad. He was obviously their best defenseman, but you can't. I mean, again, it's he just doesn't get it. You just have to come out and say, I obviously didn't have my best season, but I believe at times I was pretty solid. Like there's ways to word it, but getting the same message across.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and I've said it, and I think that I'm not alone in saying it. Provorov is the kind of player, like he's not great. Like, and when I say great, what I mean is compared to his contemporaries, top two defensemen, he's not great at any one thing. What Provorov's great at is he's not really bad at anything. There's no hole in his game, but he's not great at anything either. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like this is not me saying that this is not the formula for a top two defenseman. It just is. So, to your point, when he says, I believe I had a good. I don't know if there's just a cultural thing there. And I know he's spent a lot. He's basically been in Canada and the States since he was like 14. So it's not like he doesn't get American culture, but,
well, from Scranton, I mean,
well, but still, I mean, he was playing high level juniors and,
yeah.
So, point being is like, there is a right way to word it where you say like, look, how I feel as an individual doesn't matter. Like the team didn't succeed and I'm the best defenseman on the team. There's nothing wrong with him saying that. Or I believe, like I played the most minutes. The team wasn't good. Some of that goes to me. There's a way to word it with, where, I don't think I had a bad season, but obviously I accept some blame.
Yeah, no, Hart came out and he was very upfront and honest about stuff. And it's obvious that he was greatly affected, as we've talked about. Greatly affected about being stuck at home, being stuck in a hotel on the road, not seeing his family. He said he was looking for it. I said he hasn't seen his family in over 6 months. So, like, people have to realize like that means something. That he obviously had a huge effect on him. Guaranteed, it had a huge effect on a guy like Myers.
The single younger guys, I would imagine it really was. We're talking about a guy like Hart. He comes from he's not from exactly the biggest city. He's way far away from home. Very isolated. We don't know how many friends he's made outside of the team, if any. Like it's hard to build a support system, and he's young. And if you listen to him talk, he's a bright kid and he's a nice kid, but he doesn't strike me as the kid that's also standing there as the most confident and can strike up like all of these things. When I say confident, I mean socially confident, not confident in his game. I think he's pretty confident in who he is as a hockey player, but all of these things contribute and we don't really know. And look, everybody had to deal with it and there's teams that dealt with it better. We're not going to sit here and say, like it's a reason, not an excuse. That's also been our theme as we've gotten through here. But the idea that, these teams like the Flyers, where there was some disappointment, I would imagine who's another disappointing team, Vancouver. I would imagine there's some similar themes there.
Yep. A lot. I mean, Demko was thrown in as a starter because Markstrom left for Calgary. Calgary's actually a better example.
I just felt like Vancouver was similar to the Flyers because of like playoff success and young,
how well
some
they
young
did
players.
last year.
Yeah.
So they didn't handle stuff right. They started the year off the way the Flyers played in March. They were, behind the 8 ball right from the get go, getting just torched, and they started to right the ship, and then they stumbled a little bit. Then they got COVID and got it real bad.
They got the really bad strain. The news coming out of Vancouver was not very good.
No, so they just kind of got crushed. And it was funny because when they came back and they ended up beating Toronto in his first 2 games back, I was like, oh, Vancouver! I even did it myself.
It was an advantage, right?
Oh, yeah. maybe they can sneak up on all these teams and win all these games in hand. But like when you realize the schedule that they had, which was just crazy, while coming back from COVID, which all of them had, most of them had very, very badly. It just wasn't like it wasn't going to happen. So it's a lot of similarities between the two teams.
I would be interested again. This might just take a little bit more. I know no one's going to be interested in a long data discussion. There are things that we can talk about that are more tangible, but I think it'd be interesting, right? Because what happens, the Flyers go on their COVID pause, but also what happened is New Jersey didn't play for a little while. So in that March block, when you look at it, when you look at how bad it is, you have to remember, right? Like schedules got, I don't want to say changed up, but things got moved around, things got compressed and whatnot. So March was their heaviest month as well. And so you're playing regularly, you're struggling, but you're also playing, you have one matchup against Buffalo in that time. So as we talked about all through this time is you didn't have practice time. You didn't have really meeting time other than maybe Zoom, which obviously isn't the same. I can't imagine what film sessions look like during this time. I wonder if when you got cold and you were in your heaviest part of the month, it just, again, exacerbated so much of that spiral.
Yeah, that definitely had a huge part of it. And they just were never able to pull themselves out of it. And I have a hard time holding people's feet to the fire. And I get other teams had the same situation and played well comparatively, but again, it's a reason. One thing that did come out of the exit interviews was the fact that certain players went back to Canada during the quote unquote off season, and a lot of Canada was shut down, and it was brought up that certain players.
They specifically named Patrick, I think.
Yeah, did not come into the season in shape, and they used everything being locked down as an excuse, but they should have figured a way to get in shape, is what I'm getting at. And that was one thing that was brought up during the exit interviews publicly, and AV sort of called out guys but didn't name them.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where like everybody had to deal with that, right? Most of the league is from Canada, so everybody had to deal with that. And I get that. I know that one of the players I saw getting picked on with regard was they talked about Patrick, and Patrick is also a unique case. He missed an entire year. We don't know where he was mentally or emotionally. We don't know if he's ever going to get right. Like that. It is very hard at his age. I don't know how much data there is to miss as much time as he has at this point in his career that guys get it going, at least to produce at a level that people expected him to. That's a very tall order. There's just not a long list of players selected in that range that miss a ton of time. And then it would be even less that get it back. And there's just something with all sports. When you miss time, when you're like at that age that you just can't make it up. And then teams get less patience with you.
Especially when you're dealing with the head. I mean, it's not like he tore his ACL, where it was just a matter of being the physical part of it. You don't know what kind of side effects it had. And then also, again, so he's coming back in the NHL having no contact, very little hockey. He wasn't going to be in perfect shape to begin with. So I just wasn't expecting. I think maybe
you didn't expect what you got, but
I expected more than that.
Yeah.
I expected more than that. I didn't, and to be honest, and probably I shouldn't have. I also expected more out of Lindblom, and that was probably because in my head I'm thinking, all right, you're getting your leading goal scorer at the time of his diagnosis, and you're getting your third line center back that you didn't have last year. And when in reality, you're not getting those players back. You're getting them back in name, but not the player. And you saw towards the end of the year, Lindblom started to have spurts where he played like he did, the year and a quarter before he got diagnosed.
The way he ended the season was I'll use the word encouraging. Obviously, the whole season, the whole team, other than maybe Farabee and Giroux, you're disappointed in a bit. But I was encouraged with Oscar. We'll see what happens with York. I mean, you don't want to read too much into a handful of, a very small handful of games, but
who's he kissing? You're at a kid's baseball field. Don't be kissing. Especially kids. You don't want to be kissing kids.
Here, he admitted that he had a typo.
So,
I mean, do you want to call the police? He's kissing kids at his son's baseball game.
Just go to just find the loudmouth guy. But he so Oscar even admitted that he started to feel better, which is encouraging. And I think you're going to have your hope you would have a close to back to normal Lindblom getting in. Yeah, you'll get some sleep in jail, all right. I mean, you may not wake up after what they do to you, but yeah. So like they're gonna make some changes, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. And coming into this offseason, after you handle the Kraken draft, it's outside of Hart, no one is untouchable. There should be no one that's untouchable. You have to improve this team, and I believe Chuck is going to do that. But he's got to make big moves. So
we talk. Go ahead, Paul.
And it's obvious they're not happy with the mix that they have, and I think my whipping boy is a huge part of it in Voracek. It's obvious, and I think he's one of the ones that did not come into camp in shape. When you look at his from afar and you're looking at just the stat sheet, you're like, oh, he was on pace for 70 points, 14 goals, whatever it was. But just the way he played just wasn't good enough.
It was a far cry from last year.
Oh, when he bought in and he was so good, and then in the playoffs he was one of the better players. Jack Eichel, Hagen the third.
I get you, Eichel, Dahlin, and Reinhart.
Yeah. So ironically, my friend Mike asked me today, because odds came out, as I texted you guys, odds came out about where Eichel's going to land if he gets traded, which now I've thought about it more today. Would you trade for Eichel right now with his back?
I'd like to know what's going on with the neck surgery.
Yeah, the neck, not the back. Oh, same thing. I'd be hard pressed to give up because it's going to be
expensive, right? Like
in my head, it would be Hayes, Frost, York, and a first.
Or equal players, depending on, how Buffalo values some other players.
Buffalo would have to take, obviously, would have to take.
They have to take a player that can play right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, besides that, in order to make the salary work, they would to take. They would need to take
Hayes or JVR or
something like that, and they would obviously. We would have if you're picking up Eichel, you don't have a need for Hayes because Eichel is now your number one center or number two center, however you want to put it.
I thought Eichel moved to the wing. Am I wrong? I mean, he can play both. It's not like you're going to sit here and I'm going to argue that Eichel is a wing. I believe that he played a good chunk at wing.
Yeah, I thought he was supposed to center Hall and I guess Reinhardt or someone.
Well, Reinhardt's a center.
Oh,
so I think it was Reinhardt, Hall, and Eichel.
Maybe I forget who was. I just remember that a lot of the excitement was Eichel and Hall playing together. So either way, they still need centers. I would do it if he was healthy. If he was just
right. If you're not worried about the neck, you'd only get so many shots at players of that caliber.
Yeah, and I think Hayes is a good player, and I think Hayes is good for this team and good for this city, especially the organization having some personality. And he didn't have a good year, obviously, and that was a big hole in the penalty kill. You didn't get. I mean, they didn't score a shorthanded goal this year. He had
until the very end. Yeah, Lott scored one when the games didn't matter.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah, he scored one against one of the last Jersey games.
So, I mean, he had 5 last season.
Yeah, I mean himself and the unit had more. Lawton had a few, and the penalty kill was just so different overall. And as much as the fans wanted to talk about Niskanen, and we've discussed it, Niskanen's a nice player. He's not Victor Hedman. We can't act like he was. We can act like him leaving left a giant hole. We're not going to sit here and say it didn't, but we can't crown him
No, it's Niskanen leaving, Braun being just god awful in the beginning of the season, Myers being god awful from game 1 on, outside of a game here and a game there, and that's why and we talked about it last week. I'm willing to move Myers.
Yeah,
I think it's only for a package for a defenseman
of better quality.
So
some of when we talk about Myers, some of what we're discussing too is sometimes we look at it and there's that big P word, there's that big potential word, and we like the way he skates. He's very fast, deceptively fast, really. He's got a hard shot. What else do you ask for from a defenseman? Well, at his size, he's blaring, just glaringly not physical at all. And not that you've got to lay out big checks, but it also feels like he's not exactly the strongest on the puck.
Yeah, and just his decision making, with the puck after contact was terrible.
But the idea,
black cherry, Chris, black cherry, because I can't find it anywhere. It's way more valuable than either one of those guys.
But the idea is that also Myers is an undrafted player, and maybe obviously he's overplayed that. Just making it to the league is overplaying that. But maybe we there you go, Paul.
What do I got to do, Chris?
You got to Venmo him, probably.
Keep it PG.
But maybe that potential, that ceiling that we are looking at, or more or less, the ceiling's still high. Maybe the floor is a lot lower than we thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not making, for the young players, I'm not making any long-term assumptions going forward. But his value did dip, obviously. That being said, he's a huge right-handed, great skating defenseman, he's always going to be valuable. Those guys have to prove over and over and over again that they can't play. And that hasn't happened yet. He's had one bad – he still has not played an 82-game season in the NHL.
Well, and his partner didn't have a good season.
No. Sanheim was good at times. And, again, like Provorov wasn't good, wasn't great, wasn't good. He was okay. But again, a lot of that is because of his lack of a partner that let him take chances and just compliment him. And the same thing can be said for Sanheim. Sanheim's not a dominant defenseman. He's the reason why he's not a top pairing defenseman is because he's hit or miss. His game fluctuates too much. Whereas Provorov, his game is very consistent. And like you had said earlier, he's not awesome at anything. Like he doesn't have the booming shot. He's not overly fast. He's not the big hitter. He's not
a great stick handler. He's not a bad stick handler.
He's not the big, mean, nasty son of a bitch. He's just really good at a lot of stuff. And guys like him just need a guy to compliment them that are also good, but they don't have to be great. And then together they really lock shit down. And they didn't have that this year. So they were missing their partners, and that exposed them. So they need someone to just compliment them. And
I think that you're right though. Like I think that when we look at this season felt and looked a lot more like 2 years ago and before then than it felt like last year. And the reality is the mix may be more of the problem than the talent.
The talent's there.
That the pieces just don't fit. Yeah.
They just didn't. It's not like they just forgot how to coach, and that some of these players forgot how to play. Like Konechny was god awful this year, but he didn't forget how to play.
Yeah, the mix was bad, and they kept trying to juggle the lines every game. It's not abnormal, but every game you're getting a new lineup. That means something isn't working, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like it's not the biggest deal to judge. It's not like it used to be where like juggling a line like, oh, we're gonna was a big deal. Where lines were preset. Lines change all the time, but the reality is if a line is working, you don't usually just shake it up to shake it up.
Yeah, I mean, as a coach, when you're looking at your lineup, you're looking for pairs. So and then when you have your pairs, then you're just looking for that third guy to complement them. And you play around with things. You generally don't want to blow it up completely unless things aren't going well. And the other thing that was a problem this year was because of the schedule. Guys were exhausted. You had guys that like Lindblom and Patrick that needed breaks, and they weren't deep enough. They didn't, for something that we haven't talked about that is probably a big loss was Frost. Frost getting hurt in his second game? Maybe third. I forget.
And that was it. That was the season.
His season was over. So, like that right there was huge, not just for Frost, the player, but also the Flyers.
The depth, yeah.
He was a guy that could have filled a gap and brought something they don't have a lot of, which is straight line speed and creativity, and that could have helped things, and also allowed AV to take some minutes off of other guys to give them more consistent breathers.
But it might also make the other players better. So just so you guys know, if you guys don't know, the comp for Morgan Frost was Claude Giroux. So not saying that he's going to be as good as Claude Giroux. We don't know what he's going to be, but that's the comp. So if you remember young Giroux and the creativity and getting guys, good looks, when people get on Giroux about goals, he's never a sniping player. He's a playmaking player. And that's what Frost is. He's a playmaker. He gets guys. That's been his hallmark. He gets guys the puck in good areas.
Yeah. Jason Martinez had a great tweet. He produced just as much as Barzal did this year. And I think he was a little bit off of who was I forget who the other player was.
Matthews?
No. Was it Tavares maybe?
Tavares. Tavares having a nice year, but Tavares is supposed.
So he did his job, And
he always does.
Yeah, and I find it funny because everyone questions his leadership and Strip to see, and so it's just so nauseating.
I think we got a new partner here.
He can't. What's that?
We can't hear you. You're fine.
He can't. He came in. He came out at the exit meetings and said how he was pissed off, and especially from the 9-0 game on, he voiced his opinion. But I guess that doesn't count. And just because they didn't just flip a switch and he didn't carry them to the promised land, he carry him on his back as a 34-year-old center that is small and not as good as Crosby and McDavid.
Those players are better, but they also have historically, I mean, maybe not McDavid, have historically had better teams as well.
McDavid had Drew has never had a Draisaitl.
Other than the end of career Yager?
Yeah, that's not the same.
It's not the same. No, Draisaitl is ridiculous.
Yeah, you have two of probably the top 10, if not definitely top 15 best players in the world, or in the league at least, on the same team. That's stupid.
Yeah, but it can't go unsaid. Hockey is not a sport like basketball.
It's not the NBA.
It's not the NBA. And it's not the league that it was in the 90s, where you could be a one-line team. I mean, other than if you're McDavid and Draisaitl.
Well, also with the exception to that rule would be in that, in the 90s, Hasek made that Sabres team good. Lundqvist that Rangers, his majority of his Ranger teams were good, but he made them great.
Great goaltending can solve for a lot of problems.
Oh yeah, big time, and
more so than great goal scoring.
Yeah, because offense in any sport, well, maybe
it's
not
streaky. It comes and goes.
It goes cold.
Yep.
Defense and goaltending can just stay as long as there's not huge dips. As long as you're ranging from good to great and not having that huge dip like we saw this year with Hart, then you're going to be in every single game, and it's a lot easier to compete.
Yeah, and that's just the nature of the game. So I also feel like we overemphasize the team's success under Giroux when he is not Crosby. He is not McDavid. He's a very, very good player. But the talent that, even if you look at Ovechkin, the talent that the Capitals have put from line 1 to line 4, they're not comparable.
Yeah. I mean, Ovi's had Backstrom. They've had awesome secondary scoring. You had Alexander Semin back in the day. They've always had two good lines that can score, and G's never had that. He's had Jake when Jake was good. He had Hart.
The best goal scorer probably while Giroux was here was Wayne Simmons.
Yeah, sadly.
And
he was a one-dimensional player.
No offense to Wayne. We all love the Wayne train, but that can't be your best goal scorer.
No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Simmons. I love you. I would, I was a huge fan while you were here. If you ever get to hear this, but the reality is it just says something about the level of talent that they put on this team. You can't be a Stanley Cup contender.
No. Nope.
In that regard, and that also, again, it says something about Giroux and his time here in Philadelphia. And not that I'm going to sit here and go, I'm sure he cries in his piles of millions of dollars. That being said, we can't call a spade a shovel. We have to call a spade sometimes.
Yeah, and he wants to win. He wants to win a cup. He wants to do it here. So obviously it's frustrating. He knows the end is coming. He's got one more year left under contract here, and you don't know. I think he resigns, but you're going to have Coots. I think the salaries will basically just flip flop, but I think Coots will get a little bit more.
But he's entering. What's he going into? He'll be 30.
Who's that? Coots.
Coots when his contract is up.
You forget, like you don't realize how old he is. I mean,
yeah, because it took some players just take longer to get to their peak, and some players' peaks are longer. Sometimes they're shorter.
He's only 28. He's
he'll
be 29.
He'll be 29 when his new contract starts.
Yeah, or just turning 30. Yeah.
It is something to consider. Hockey's not football. Careers aren't over at 30, but production, it is getting to be a younger man's sport as far as where peaks are. I think,
Coots is lucky. I'll say that. He's lucky in terms of the fact that he still has one more year left. So when he's going to be negotiating, the league should be basically back to some sort of normal. Obviously, maybe not quite what it was, but I mean, you're getting a new TV deal, so the league is going to be flush with more money.
It might take a bit to affect the cap, though.
Yeah, but I mean, that's why you see guys signing 1 year deals,
1 and 2 year deals,
no more than 2 year deals, because they want to be free agents. I can only imagine. Actually, I'm going to do it right now.
So while you're looking at it, I'd be remiss to say the reality is I think by the start of next season, it's going to be buildings at capacity unless something crazy changes. New guidance from the CDC today was if you're vaccinated, you can go mask off at indoors, you can resume your normal activities. So I believe that if the season starts on time in October, that we're going to be looking at buildings at capacity. Yeah. Now we have to look at what people have lost their jobs, people have lost things, their livelihoods, businesses have been boarded up. So we don't know what ticket sales are going to look like. I would imagine the Philadelphia area is not going to be that affected, but some of the other cities might be more as far as ticket sales go. So
I'm gonna read off some names. These are guys that are free agents after next season: Malkin, Giroux, Kessel, Letang, Pavelski, Matthew Tkachuk. I'm sorry, Tkachuk is a RFA. Fleury, Bergeron.
But teams might be flush and they might look at offer sheet and some RFAs.
Johnny Hockey, Philip Forsberg, Johnny Boychuk, Barkov, Brock Besser, Tomas Hertl. Wow.
A lot of vets, a lot of big name vets.
Yeah, Seth Jones, Zibanejad, Carter. Let's see.
I wonder.
Werenski.
Seth Jones is an interesting name.
Because Columbus is in a real tough spot. Morgan
Riley, yeah, and Toronto is going to be an interesting spot too.
Yeah,
the guys
but Columbus is going to be an interesting spot. So they're going to have to sign. They're going to have to sign Werenski and Jones at the same time, and for them to commit to stay in Columbus, they're going to have to make some moves to show that they're serious about winning, because they're not going to sign long term there. Because I mean, who else? I mean, and here's the problem for them: they're going to have to sign both, because if they don't sign one, the other's not going to stay.
Well, and then they have decisions to make this season.
Yeah, I mean, but that's why. So, for as big as this offseason is for the Flyers, which is big, this offseason for the Jackets is much larger in terms of this offseason will shape the way the franchise goes over the next 5 years in terms of re-signing their own players, and they've had trouble with that. And I have a feeling that they're not going to sign before. I believe they won't re-sign until the middle of next year. They're not going to re-sign before this
early.
Season. Yeah, they won't re-sign early.
So do you have cap friendly up?
Yeah.
So the idea would be assume that if they were to re-sign, Line A is an RFA, correct?
Correct, yes.
So assume that they would re-sign Line A. That's what, $8 million.
I don't believe that. No,
I don't believe that's going to happen. What's that?
I no, it's going to be more than that. Let me pull
10?
it up there. Hold on. Line is he's currently making 4.9.
Yeah, but he took a bridge deal.
He took a bridge deal. Everything that's been discussed publicly has been it's going to at least be 10.
10. So 10 per. So if they were to sign Line this offseason, which you and I do not think is going to happen, but the idea is, so this is why when we talk about Eichel and the Rangers, that it might just be like the Flyers might not even be in the Eichel sweepstakes. They may be back in the Line sweepstakes.
Guess how many players Columbus has signed after next year?
Their roster's empty, right? After next year?
After next year, 4.
Yeah. That can't stay that way either.
That is insane. That is crazy.
So the idea is no team's going to probably give an RFA tender to Line A. There would probably be a sign and trade, right? Where he might have to negotiate the terms of the contract with the new team, you know, like.
That's if Columbus allows that.
Right. But they might, if you're Columbus, right? Paul, you're the GM of Columbus tomorrow.
I'm Jarmo Kekalainen.
Who has expressed that he's not that interested, you know, like in moving Line A. I don't know how much that's
and Line A came out and said that he was happy there and
playing fourth line minutes.
Yeah, and I'm sure Torts leaving plays a part in that, but I don't fully believe that either.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like I'm not on their team, but and maybe promises were made to him. We don't know. But how happy would you be with like, oh, we're going to fire the coach at the end of the year, but during that time, you're just going to have to deal with sitting and not playing. You know, like why not fire him before? What's he earned?
Well, they didn't necessarily. I mean, they mutually agreed to part ways, even though his contract was up.
Right.
It was just they weren't going to bring him back, and I don't think Torts. I think Torts just run his time there.
Well, that's what he does. I mean,
that's what he does. And a guy like, and also Kekalainen is looking at it like Line A is big for them because if they can re-sign Line A, that helps them re-sign Jones and Werenski.
Yeah, but that's going to put them in a weird spot, right? They're going to be in a like not that those players aren't worth eating up that much of any team's cap. Those are very good players, but it will. I don't know how many, you know, if they have all their picks, you know, like these are things that maybe, you know, we should know, but I don't know what their pick situation looks like. They may want to fill their roster up more, I guess is my question.
They have a lot of, dude, they have 3 first rounders this year.
Oh, so they went almost like Ottawa.
So they have 3 first rounders this year, no second.
Yeah, but that's fine.
Yeah, a third, a fourth, and 2 fifths, a 6th and a 7th. The following year, they have a first, a second, a third, 2 fourths.
So they have their complement of picks.
Yeah, so they can make some deals. He's in position to wheel and deal, and they have good young players. I mean, if you look at their you know at their lineup, you know Emil Bemstrom, he's a very good player. They're high on Texier. Nathan Gerby's an older guy. Dalpy's older. Cole Sherwood, I'm not familiar with him, but you have Stefan Matteau, but he's 27, so he's not really a prospect. But they have some prospect defensemen. They also have Delzada. What a stud that guy is.
He's still in the league?
Torts brought him back.
So maybe Torts will end up back in New York too.
It'll be interesting to see. They have, you know, and they have some other Liam Foudy, who's a very high end prospect. So they have some good young players, but the problem is they need NHL players right now, and they need high end guys. They need to be able to fill out their top 6, and you know Max Domi cannot be your first line center.
No, and I guess that's what when I'm talking about moving Line A, that's what I'm looking at. Is it worth it to get players, like multiple players for now? And where you know you're not getting the high end talent, you might get good enough. but they have some really long-term questions to ask themselves, which is more or less, there's teams when we looked at it, and I know we were doing a postmortem of the season. Now the season's over. What do we have to look forward to right now? Expansion draft. And when I went through Cap Friendly, teams were just not in the same shape as they were with Vegas came, where they've got to shed a bunch of salary and they're making trades for Vegas to agree to take higher paid players. A lot of teams aren't in that same situation, which is also why Vegas was competitive year one.
Yeah, I mean, guys like Fletcher made poor decisions.
Yeah,
and they panicked because they had never been part of anything like that at that level. So, because the expansion drafts in the past, like you could pretty much you weren't giving up any good players.
Well, right, different, no cap in the past, right when Florida and
Minnesota and
Ducks
so you didn't have to, now you have to have players of a certain caliber available. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know if I said before I would trade a first to get them to take Voracek.
I don't know that it costs you that. No,
but I mean, I think you just, hey, JVR is available. Hey, Jake's available. But the problem is Ghost is going to be available. And but that being said, they have to hit the cap floor too.
Yeah.
So it's not like they can't, but I mean, they can also sign guys, but they're not going to be able to get any high-end free agents, not for year one.
And there are some things to like JVR and Voracek, while they have high salaries, their term isn't forever.
Nope. For a guy like Voracek who could benefit from a fresh start, a guy that can still skate well, would be ideal for them. I mean, if they take him, he still has 3 years left at 8.2, but he's still producing. And if you get him to buy in a little bit, as he showed last year, it can change things.
Yeah, it just there's a lot of interesting stuff. What we're hoping is one of those three players will end up going to Seattle, right? Because it does free up some cap space to. The Flyers also have some big decisions to make with some of their players that will be coming up, like we mentioned, Couturier. Hart CLC he's an RFA next year.
Carter Hart?
Yeah.
No, he's an RFA this offseason. Yeah.
So yeah, I can't imagine, right? Like he's not hitting that at a time that he wishes he was hitting it because this year was not particularly good for him. So I'd imagine that you're going to see a short-term deal for him unless for some reason some team pushes it with a offer sheet.
That ain't gonna happen. There's just not enough. There's not enough cap space out there. 1, 2. There's actually not that. I mean, it's
rare anymore, right?
There's not a lot of teams that are going to be willing to give up.
What you have to give up. Yeah. So the idea is he's probably going to take a short-term deal. A bridge deal as they're called. Which is good for the Flyers in a way while they figure out some of their other questions. But it might be bad because what we expect is that he will get back to where he is, or where he was, or where we expect him to be, which will probably cost you a lot, $10 million.
But if they, let's say they sign him to a 2-year bridge gap deal, he's still going to be an RFA. So
it'll be a second one.
It'll be a second one. So it'll be like Sanheim where the Flyers still hold a bit of leverage.
Right. So look, we're going to be doing a lot of off-season discussion on moving players, trade targets, things that we like. Well, obviously, even though we're a Flyer show, we'll be talking playoffs. I just picked my pool team. I do a fantasy pool every year where you pick one player from every playoff team. You got to fill 10 forwards, 4 defensemen, 2 goaltenders. So you can have the same players across. But it's fantasy, but not really. But it's a way to make some of these games a little more interesting, especially
What's your roster look like?
I mean, in some ways I'm very traditional, like I've got McKinnon and McDavid and
It's hard not
Kirill,
to pick those guys.
Karpatsov. Right, is that how you say his name? Kirill. Kaprizov. Marner. And then I had I took Letang from Pittsburgh. I just think his high end defense is worth it to not go with Crosby or Malkin. I took Carey Price and Fleury.
Is Price going to be healthy?
I hope so.
Because he hasn't been playing.
He hasn't been playing, but I know that it looked like, because I've been doing fantasy all year, we got a little bit of football with this season, which was like once teams clinched, they really clinched a berth, especially Montreal. They knew they weren't really going to get in the first place. They start resting guys because the season was so compressed. So we'll see. We'll see, what his injury is. If he's not healthy, I'll just, hope I can get a change in before we get going. But you have to decide what you're going to do, like with your goaltenders, and if you want a goaltender that's going to go late, because wins are worth a certain amount, or do you want to roll the dice with a forward who you get, a good amount of assists or goals. So it's hard. You can't not take, I debated, because there are decisions, right? Like I debated going Draisaitl over McDavid only because I expect Draisaitl to outpoint McDavid, but if God forbid it happens, that's the kind of the decision that's going to separate you from the other 73 people. You got to take risks in order to separate yourself.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Vegas does with their goalies, because I mean, it just seems like they just have a love affair with Leonard, and I get Leonard's a good goalie, and he's obviously a great locker room guy and everything, but Fleury's been awesome this year, and he's going to give you saves. He's going to give you saves that Leonard can't.
So as we wrap up, I'm going to overlay the other shows that are on Phillyverse. We're going to keep talking. I'll call out those shows as we're going before we go off air. But I'm going to put it up so you guys who are with us watching wherever you're watching on Facebook or Twitter or Periscope or YouTube or Twitch. I'm going to put that overlay up so this show lineup for lineup. I know that there are some more shows that are going to be added, but this is the current lineup. So as we wrap up, I'm going to leave this up. You're not going to see our beautiful mugs for the next, minute or so. And then we'll let you guys go if you're still with us. So, obviously, it's hard when you're looking at those lineups. You make these decisions, but you also don't want to outsmart yourself when you're picking those players. It's hard to look at a Nathan McKinnon and not say, and go, no, I'll take McCarr. Carr's a great player, but
yeah, I mean, for the same reason that you go with Letang, he's gonna be out there in every power play. He'll probably get more minutes than McKinnon. McCarr is so damn good.
He's so good. I went back and looked at the scouting report from McCarr, and they some of these scouts nailed it. They nailed it.
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
they basically said generational type defenseman based on his ability to his two-way ability.
Yeah, he's
so good.
It's hard not to just fall in love with his talent, and we talked about Quinn Hughes and everything, but McCarr is better.
McCarr's a prototypical defenseman.
Yeah,
everything.
Give me the guy with the size that can also skate and have the shifty moves, and it's just sick. He's just so good, and he's gonna guys like him and Letang are gonna pick up points just from being on the ice with the
other players,
and Crosby and Malkin. So yeah, I mean, especially McCarr. I mean, they're gonna be out there against the Blues. I wouldn't sleep on the Blues.
No, the Blues are always dangerous, man. They've got some really good players.
If Binnington has his game going, they're gonna be dangerous.
Yeah.
And even though I like Vegas, Minnesota, man, they're fun.
Out of nowhere team. You know, they've been average to below average for a little bit. It's fun to see them playing well
and exciting. And
Yeah.
Vegas has struggled with them. I was reading an article on Hockey Buzz, the guy that covers the Knights, and he was saying how Vegas has really struggled with Minnesota this year and actually all time. They've, for whatever reason, the last 3 years, they've really struggled with Minnesota, which is weird. But some teams just match up with other teams.
Yeah. So later tonight, guys, you have tables, ladders, and chairs. I believe that is a callback to some highlight reel wrestling matches. That's at 9:00 tonight and every Thursday. Tomorrow, you've got the Philly Broadcast, which is a 4-for-4 sports show. That's on at 6:30, your afternoon drive. Monday is the Football Smack Talk show. I think that speaks for itself. Monday, that's at 6, and then Monday at 7:30 is Diamond Club. You got to see our fantastic co-host Chris on with us. He is one of the co-hosts of the Diamond Club. They're recently mentioned during the Phillies broadcast. Wednesday at 6, you've got the Bald Eagle show, obviously an Eagles focused show. And then Wednesday night at 8, so 2 hours later, you've got Mike Sports. Mike is an MIC Sports. That is another 4-for-4 show as well. So that's the lineup on Phillyverse. Oh, look, Chris is back. That's the lineup for Phillyverse of all the shows that are going on with this network. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. You're looking at a Sixer show?
Yeah, Sixer show on Tuesdays.
Tuesdays at what time?
I don't know. Probably if we do your UFC show, we'll figure out the times then.
Okay, so Tuesday, you are the only show currently. Would be the Sixer show you're looking at next week.
I hope so.
Okay. Keep your eye out for the Sixer show. Does that have a name yet, Chris?
No.
The Sixer show.
The Untitled, built similarly, unprecedented Sixer show.
The second round champions show.
The don't play with the you think I'm playing show.
Oh my God.
The test me show.
I heard you just had a new co-host.
Did you have a new co-host?
No, you had a new co-host come on during the show.
We did. I was hoping that she'd want to go live.
She probably too.
No, she can talk hockey.
Okay. We'd be glad to have Missy on.
She might stab us, somebody.
So I was just running down. We're at the end of our show. Just running down the Phillyverse lineup. Our new home as of 2 weeks ago. We weren't quite different enough, but we were the same enough.
I like it.
Okay.
More importantly, did your kids' team win?
No, I left because my son's an asshole.
Hey.
No, he is. I don't care. So I rolled. I'll go back and pick him up when the game's over.
Fair enough. So we're here every Thursday, 5:30. We'll be talking off-season stuff, and maybe we'll give some more.
Baby.
Yeah, and playoffs, and hockey playoffs. Maybe we'll give some more of that talk about the common matchup and what high danger chances look like, and those kinds of things, because some of the old stats that we used are more blunt force instrument, and we've got better, more fine tools that exist. What's that?
And maybe Tyron Hatcher will be on.
I mean, we'll see. We're working on it.
If we get Taryn on, our views are going to go up.
We can't make promises.
But we can shoot for the moon.
We can shoot for the moon and hopefully land amongst the stars.
By Doge.
and maybe we'll be just different enough to not have to say bye.
I got 2 words for you. Bye.